28th. This meeting will be conducted. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the State of California Executive Order N2920. I think we don't have to go through the whole speech there.
No, you don't need to.
Thank you. As we call the meeting to order, if we would take a moment of silence in honor and memory of those who lost their lives on Wednesday. Thank you all, and also thank you, staff, for the post. It was very generously and kindly stated of our concern and condolences to all the families and extended families of BTA. So thank you. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Gibbons.
Aye, you're here.
Director Elahi.
Present.
Director Abekoga.
Here.
Thank you. And I'll note that currently absent are Vice Chair Tyson and Director Flagger, but we do have a quorum of the committee.
Thank you. And at this time, if we have any members of the public that would like to comment on matters that are not on the agenda, do we have anyone identified as liking to speak on a non-agendized item? I don't see any. Thank you.
No.
We will then go on to the consent calendar, which is an action item. And it has approval of the minutes from April 23rd and the revised schedule of the November, December executive committee meetings. Is there any comment? Seeing none, does anyone like to make a motion on the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Director Elahi and a second by Director Abekoga, by Chair Abekoga. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Gibbons.
Aye.
Director Elahi.
Present. Yeah, aye. Aye.
Director Abekoga.
Aye.
Thank you. And that motion carries with Directors Flagger and Tyson absent.
Thank you. And we have on the regular calendar 3 items. We will begin with the CEO update, which is a discussion.
Thank you, Chair Gibbons. I have 4 items to talk to you about at the CEO report, and I will be helped in this by staff and our general counsel. So we'll start with summer readiness, followed by virtual meetings, followed by SB 1383, and lastly, Western Community Energy bankruptcy. So for summer readiness communications, I'm going to hand it over to our communications manager, Pamela Leonard.
Good afternoon, directors. Thank you for having me to talk about this topic. We'll just dive right in. We go to the next slide. So we are planning to lead a bunch of communication efforts to be prepared for summer flex alerts, any potential power emergencies, and public safety power shutoff events. Of course, we learned a lot last summer. We also are in a much better position on the communications front because we are able to do the advanced planning and put together this plan for what we will do in case of certain events, as they all vary a little bit. We also have new communications capabilities in place that we're able to leverage to reach our customers. So the first here is talking about some proactive communications that we're going to be sending out to our member agency staff and public information officers, as well as to all of you to have available. So first off is a fact sheet, or it could also end up being in the form of a blog post to just proactively communicate to customers what's different this summer compared to what happened last summer, as well as some information about, what are the differences between a flex alert, an actual emergency, like what happened last year, and what's the difference with a proactive public safety power shutoff for wildfire prevention. So they're all, have these nuances. So we want to just kind of put out some explainers for all of our stakeholders to know what's going on. There's been a lot of efforts on the state level as well. So kind of highlight how we're just better prepared overall this year. We'll also be sending out in advance digital media toolkits. So this is what we'd sent around last summer. An example of a post is to the right of the slide that can be sent out on social media, posted to websites, wherever. So folks have information about what they can do when they're asked to conserve energy on Flex Alert or other heat events. We will also be proactively communicating programs that are available to customers as they start thinking about resilience for themselves. We have of course, a solar and battery storage program right now with Sunrun that has a rebate. We also have our solar and battery assistant through our eHub and other programs that are available to customers who drive EVs and such. So moving forward, if we could advance to the next slide. So quickly, just wanted to provide an overview of what these different types of alerts, warnings, and emergencies are and how we're going to hear about when an event is called. So CAISO, as the grid operator, they're the ones who are going to be giving advanced warning. They're the ones that call Flex Alerts. They are sort of the agency of record for when, we would want to start sending out communications to assist them. We actually had a great meeting with CAISO staff who work on the Flex Alert campaign with the CalCCA marketing group. So we were able to connect with them directly and exchange notes as to what CCAs are doing and what, how we could help out. So they're the ones monitoring the weather conditions. They're going to send out notices. They did tell us that really the best way to get the most up-to-date information is through their Twitter account. That's where they send things out. But customers can also sign up directly through the Flex Alert program for direct email alerts and other ways to be notified. They also push the CAISO app and things like that. So they have a lot of different ways for customers to directly get information. And they do have some great improvements from last summer. So lots of lessons learned across the board. One of the things that you may remember is we had to constantly update all of our graphics and messaging because the Flex Alert timing kept changing. It'd be 3 to 10 or 9 to whatever. So consistent summer, it will be from 4 to 9 p.m., which gratefully it aligns with the time of use transition. So it's like, we have this massive statewide campaign going on right now, funded by the CPUC to, power down 4 to 9. So hopefully that kind of helps with some better consistency. So the different kinds of warnings that I'm going to walk through how each of these will trigger different communications activities for SVCE, but we have Flex Alerts and then different stages. The stages are actually associated with emergency events or warnings, really. So we can just go ahead and dive into those. Next slide. All right, so the Flex Alerts. So this is a voluntary call for conservation. I just mentioned it'll be from 4 to 9 consistently. Customers can sign up at flexalert.org for direct information from CAISO. But once we see an alert be issued, or if we have a heads up that an alert is coming, we will let you all know, as well as member agency staff. We will post to social media. We will share from the Flex Alert account. We also are going to do one proactive post at the beginning of summer to let customers know on Nextdoor to look out for these kinds of events, again, explain some of the differences of the summer from last summer. When a Flex Alert is called, we can activate our website pop-up And then we're going to have a ready to go email targeted to our largest residential energy users and EV drivers, asking them to conserve and provide some tips on what to do outside of the peak hours. And just one distinction is that commercial customers are going to be marketed to separately about a different program that PG&E is pushing and leading about. I think it's emergency load reduction program, and that's a separate topic. But for now, this is the focus on the residential outreach that we're going to do. Just a note here too that this is the same tactics we would use during a stage 1 emergency, because there's looking at the historical record of the CAISO alerts. Stage 1 emergency tends to not really be called because it's really similar in that it's this forecasted need for conservation. So we would do the same thing for both cases. So next slide. So here for a stage 2 emergency, this is when CAISO can see that there is going to be a potential shortage and is adding or ordering power plants to come online and ordering that backup power. This is when things are a bit more serious. So we would do all of the same actions as the previous slide, with the difference is that Nextdoor does have a feature to push out an alert. So this is actually like an emergency communication. And so we would actually activate that in this case because there's a really, really strong need to conserve. We would also email all residential customers and small and medium businesses about the need to conserve between 4 to 9 in this case. Next slide, please. And a stage 3 emergency, this is what happened last August. Blackouts are in progress or they're imminent. So in this case, it's a little too late to ask people to conserve. It's more about letting them know that, if there is a power outage, these are the things to keep in mind. This is what you should be doing or not doing. And we would share the information as it comes in continuously from CAISO, PG&E, or Office of Emergency Management. I know last year the county sets up cooling centers, resources for customers where they can go to cool down if they don't have power, or charge devices and things like that. So this is what we would do in that case. And then next slide. So for PSPS events, so we do get communicated to directly. We get information from PG&E in these cases. And so we also know that there's specific areas in our service territory that are most affected by PSPS events. Typically in the Santa Cruz Mountains or the foothills. So we would just continue to share the information that's available through PG&E. Also want to be sensitive to not having it be overly communicated, as PG&E does actively alert customers with text and email, and they've been working to improve their communications year after year. So we're really letting them continue to lead, but we will share the information available, particularly community resource centers that they set up to customers that may be affected. And, really hoping we don't have too many of these this year. And then again, it's an opportunity to talk about our resilience programs as well for those customers who may be most affected. And I think that concludes my quick presentation. And if there are questions, I'm happy to answer.
Are there any questions? Director Elahi?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I guess you almost forget after a year that this doesn't happen, but it is going to happen. Can we provide any information on where people can, what they can do to get backup power resources, whether they should be buying solar backup batteries or something else? Can that be provided somewhere with information so people can turn to that and hurry up and buy the generator or hook up the solar panels?
Yeah, so through our eHub, the Appliances Assistant is one of the tools that we have available, and there is a category for portable backup generation. We, of course, don't want to be promoting diesel, so these are typically batteries. So we can, share that resource. We also have, for customers who are interested in solar, we emphasize battery storage with solar, with the resilience as like the key focus and benefit of that. And then customers who already have solar and may be interested in batteries can use our solar and battery assistant to explore battery at that scale if they're interested in that. So we do have some resources available. And then For medically vulnerable customers, the Silicon Valley Independent Living Center does have a program to loan out batteries for customers who are on like the medical baseline program, and PG&E is working with them to fund that program, and we can help amplify that resource as being available to our customers.
Yeah, so that'll be good to do that when you send out these notices. And I don't know what kind of luck people have had. I haven't had a very good luck with trying to get solar on my house. So I'm not sure if those people are so busy that they don't have time to push it out and those resources. So maybe time for them to kind of, get themselves into top gear so they can start providing those services. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'll just offer that Director, I think he just brought up the same question I was going to comment on. This morning, there was a Cal CCA presentation and Marin Clean Energy had a very good section on what they're doing to assist the disabled community with batteries. And I think promoting, what do you call it, the Silicon Valley what center?
So the Silicon Valley Independent Living Center.
Independent Living Center. I think it would be really important to be proactive with promoting that group. I'm guessing that there is a master list of those who are disabled, in addition to the ones that may or may not be on FARA and CARE. So I think that their program was very well discussed and presented, and they had a representative from the disabled community commenting on what they were doing. So I would check it out, but getting the information out as part of this program, I think would be really a good thing. And if you do anything that needs to go to have the board members or anyone put something on Facebook, the county was doing it and it didn't work as well as we actually went to the county webpage and forwarded or shared their posts, and that was more effective than getting something directly and then putting it on our Facebook pages. So we might want to check and see what's the easiest way for people to get the messages out to our connections as well. Okay.
Just make one comment. I want to commend this the group. I think this was an excellent presentation, and it's really good to see you guys getting ready for all that. One thing I did try to go to the Flex website, and if you go to flex.com, it's somebody else. Flex.org is the website, so you may want to highlight that site a little bit more.
Yeah, flexalert.org.
Flexalert.org, not flexalert.com is.
Yeah, very, very, very good comment. And yes, it's, as we said before, staff is always proactive and lessons learned. And that's one of the things that gives us such confidence in staff, is we are thinking ahead, and that matters a lot. So thank you. Okay, if there are no other comments, I don't think that is a discussion item. That's number one. Girish, you had several?
Yes, I have several. So I'd also just make a quick note that you saw a new template for our presentations. We are transitioning to that, and thank you, Pamela and her team, for putting that together. So the next item is kind of information related to the conversation we had at the board meeting about coming back from COVID, and especially board meetings. The board wanted to explore a combination of in-person and remote meetings. And so there are two parts of the update. One, Greg Stepanisic will be talking to you about current law and what would be how we can facilitate this. And secondly, Bennett Chang will talk about current legislation and where we are with this. Greg, would you please start us off?
I'd be happy to. So where we are right now is, of course, the governor's executive order with respect to meetings and the Brown Act is still in place. And the question, though, is what happens on June 15. And we don't know at this point in time. Everyone still remains in the dark. The League of Cities, CSAC, have reached out with a letter asking that if this executive order was going to be terminated, that it really should be extended for at least 30 days after June 15, if not longer. And we're still waiting to hear what the response there will be. So at this point, the main advantage we had here during this the pandemic here has been that in having these Zoom meetings, we didn't have to identify each of your addresses, and also you didn't have to have the public coming to your house or wherever else you were located at, because under the traditional rules under the Brown Act for a teleconference meeting, and in fact, under those rules, everyone can be remote. Actually, there's no requirement under the law under the Brown Act that anyone be at the fixed location. Everyone can be remote. But you again have to disclose your address, and you have to put the notice at your house or other location. And you have to frankly allow the public to attend if someone showed up at your house. So if assuming, worst case scenario here, that on June 15, that the governor's executive order with respect to the Brown Act suspension is not extended and the traditional rules come back in play, we could still continue to have Zoom meetings, but again, we'd have to go through the more burdensome noticing requirements. A couple points though here is that you don't necessarily have to be at your house or your place of business. You could be at one of your city facilities, for example, to conduct your location. And assuming that your city or county facilities were open and could accommodate you, then of course you could actually do it there. And so what would be shown would be a location for the building, in fact, you're at. So that is one thing to be considered. As we go forward. So the main thing we'll be doing is monitoring what's going to be happening with the governor's order. And as soon as we find something out here, we will definitely be apprising the board and staff as to where we'll be at on June 15th and for the remainder of the summer.
Benno, would you give us the legislative update, and then maybe we can bring it back for questions on this entire topic, because I think there's going to be some overlap, if you don't mind, Chair Abikova.
And maybe, Andrea, you can pop up the slide very quickly. Thank you. So Greg did a great job kind of summarizing where we are and some of the activities that have gone on. I'm really here to talk about some of the legislative vehicles and the advocacy that we want to do. So as Greg mentioned, many of the statewide local government associations, including the League of California Cities, CSAC, CMUA, and others, sent that letter over to the governor asking for a transition period. In addition, the administration recently released a budget trailer bill that allows state bodies to teleconference, similar to the pandemic rules. So it says you have to provide the public with an option to call in, but then you don't have to post board members' locations, remote locations, or provide access to the public to testify at those remote locations. But very importantly, the budget trailer bill does not mention local governments in that, so it only applies to state bodies. On the other side, AB 339 by Assemblymember Lee requires public access to teleconferencing, so a portion of what we've been talking about. But notably, it doesn't change how board members teleconference, and it only applies to jurisdictions with populations of over 250,000. So it's not a perfect fix. So bottom line is there are a couple of legislative vehicles out there that deal with this topic, but nothing is exactly what the board has been telling us that they want, which, as Garish mentioned, is really maximum flexibility to do remote meetings, hybrid meetings, or some combination thereof. So as next steps, we're working with our state lobbyists and reaching out to CalCCA as our statewide organization to and also these other statewide local government associations to really push forward that flexibility that the board has wanted. It probably looks most like the budget trailer bill, but adding local governments into that authority as well. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both. Director Abikoga.
Thank you. So my question is, and I know it's all just, still up in the air, but is there, I guess, like looking at what's out there, I can see how we could, if we had to go back to at least noticing where we're calling in from, that's fine. But the challenge is the letting the public in. So the AB 339, which would require the public to be able to call in, could actually um, address that issue, right? But with 339, since it's only required for cities or jurisdictions over 250,000 people, I don't know if it's by municipality. And so does SVCE count in that? And then if you're under 250,000, even if you're not required to, can you still allow public comment to be call-ins?
Those are great questions. And Greg and I actually looked at the text and the language of AB 339, and it specifically calls out city council meetings and like board of supervisor meetings. So we think there's not enough authority in the language as it exists today to apply to SVCE. And it doesn't require that for local governments. So I'm not totally sure if local governments who are under 250,000 population could do that. But I just note that one important difference is that even if AB 339 were to pass, the existing requirements that Greg mentioned still apply. So we still would, as board members, have to allow the public access to the remote locations. Like, it doesn't change any of that existing statute as far as I know. Greg, you might have more to add here too.
No, that's a really good explanation.
So yeah, I guess that's what I'm looking for is, or the question is there, or how do we try to move something to that would, satisfy these challenges? And there's, I think, a hybrid there that, is possible, but I guess we really just need like someone to, put up a bill, or I don't know, or the governor to just say, okay, you can do this. And I'm just trying to, I guess I'm searching for that vehicle to make something that
I think
happen.
I think all this has changed how we look at how meetings get conducted. And I do think that long term, there's a need for a legislative change to provide more flexibility, in particular, I think, for joint powers authorities, who has a membership that's very broad. But in the meantime, I don't want to make predictions here, but I can't imagine why the governor would not at least do a 30-day extension. But there should be some transition here. I think we're really in the dark right now. And I think for there to be a complete drop off back to the old rules immediately on June 15th, when cities and counties are not conducting public meetings, there's very few throughout the state. We represent a number of different agencies throughout California. And there's really only maybe a handful of agencies that are meeting in public at this point in time, fully. And so this would really be quite chaotic, I think, to require all these cities and counties to be suddenly adjusting back to the old rules. So hopefully at least we have a little breathing time. And then at that point, definitely a legislative fix and the effort to work with our lobbyists and with to try to promote that type of legislation really is probably the most productive thing for us to be doing at this moment.
Yes, that is the advocacy work that we're conducting. Oh, I'm sorry. Just very quickly, I know the League of California Cities is in active conversations with Assemblymember Lee about changing some of the requirements in AB 339. Again, sort of as we look at the options out there, we think the cleanest is to add local governments, including JPAs, into that budget trailer bill. The advantage of the budget trailer bill is that it happens when the governor signs it, it's enacted. Right. AB 339 is not an urgency piece of legislation, so actually wouldn't go into effect until next January. So I think there's some downsides to a 339 vehicle as well.
Right.
Thank you. So for Director Flygor, we're just discussing the CEO's update on a second item, which has to do with how we're going to move forward with meetings. And simply said, we don't know yet. we have some requests in the works to get us past all the Brown Act challenges. I would offer this morning, there was a conversation that took place yesterday, I was briefed on, where the city managers met with the county executive, Dr. Jeff Smith. And short version is they expect that come July 1st, all cities will need to have staff back in their offices. It's not clear if that means city halls are open. The expectation was that city halls would be open on September 1st. And the thought was that if the July 1st was a date for staff, that the June 15th date would become, for meetings, would become effective July 1st. That's an extrapolation from what County Executive Director Smith said yesterday. So just as an additional source of conversation. Okay, any other questions? I didn't open it up to the public. If there's anyone from the public wishing. Yes, and Girish, did you want to say something?
No, I was wondering if you want to go to the public at any time, but I'm not done with the CEO report yet.
Okay, so
I
you
have
want me to
two
wait?
more.
I'll wait till the end of your reports and then go to the public. Fair enough.
Yes, my very
you're-
extended report on the Friday before a long weekend.
Okay, so your third topic.
Third out of fourth. So I'm going to hand it over. It's going to be Don Bray talking about an issue that has been brought to us from each of our member agencies. Each of the member agencies has a certain issue around SB 1383, and he's going to talk about how we could be potentially helpful.
All right, thanks, Girish, and good afternoon, directors. So SB 1383 was passed back in 2016. It's the short-lived Climate Pollutants Act, and the spirit of this legislation was to keep organics out of landfills. And to do that under the legislation involves setting up a market for organics that would otherwise go into landfills. And so this has played out over a few years and has now translated into requirements for our local jurisdictions to buy organic material beginning next year. You know, the next slide, please. So these are the options. Local jurisdictions can buy compost or mulch or electricity from qualifying biomass sources or electricity from qualifying renewable natural gas. So these are the four options, and the quantities are shown there. And we've been working with a group of interested parties from the different jurisdictions, actually led by Tony Yulo. And they've been doing a lot of research in their individual jurisdictions and have concluded that, you know, this amount of compost or mulch would you know, bury their jurisdictions, and it really isn't practical. It's also quite as expensive, as you can see on the right. So they reached out to us and said, hey, can you give us some information on these options that involve electricity? Ian Williams is also on the line here from our Power Resources Group, did some good background research, and we identified that there could be options to procure electricity from renewable gas, or RNG as it's known, that would be well priced potentially relative to the other options that are out there. So we've been in conversations in this working group that Tony chairs, and they've now really sort of officially made the request of us, hey, could you put together a joint RFP that different jurisdictions could be party to go out and see if we could line up renewable gas to serve this need. So next slide, please. So the way that we're looking at handling this, there is a form that's been put together that the cities are going to send us, basically saying they're interested. We're going to return to them a letter of interest to be signed by their lead executive, typically the city manager. That form would also say, this is how much product we're interested in, how much electricity from renewable gas. And we're going to collect those letters of interest by the 1st of July, and then begin a joint RFP process, assuming that there's sufficient interest registered across our member agencies. And then based on the results of that, a few months later, we would look for letters of commitment from each of our participating member agencies. And this would be to a long-term type of supply arrangement, basically saying we're going to buy this much RNG or electricity from RNG over a 10 or 15 or even 20-year period. That term is going to depend on what comes back to us, of course, from the suppliers. This is a non-trivial amount of money for a city of 100,000. This could be a couple $100,000 additional each year. Important to note that there's some savings in here as well, because cities buy electricity from us already. So we can, in a sense, credit the value of the electricity supply costs that we currently incur against this higher cost of electricity from RNG. So that's a part of the reason why the economics may be a little more attractive for RNG. So a good opportunity for SVCE to work with its member agencies in helping to potentially address this this new requirement. So any questions on this?
Any questions? Director Elahi?
So the collection of these materials is going to be done by the people who collect the trash and the recyclables, I guess, and you would be contracting with them to deliver those items to you. I don't think you will get into the trash.
In the case of the RNG resources that we're looking at, for instance, that is handled by by other third parties. So the material is brought to the digester, the renewable gas is created and then turned into electricity by a generator that's likely co-located. The resources that we're looking at are, I believe, in Southern California. Ian can provide more precision there, but yeah, we're really looking at a package deal in a sense for the product, for the electricity that is certifiably produced from this qualifying renewable gas. And by qualifying, it has to come from certain feedstocks, food waste, or other material that otherwise would have been landfilled. That's, again, the spirit of the act, the SB 1383 legislation.
So Director Elahi, if I may offer, there is a joint powers authority that handles Los Gatos, Saratoga, Campbell, and Montessorino. It's called the West Valley Solid Waste Management Authority. And what I've done is I've forwarded to staff that this Joint Power and Management Authority has a project manager from HF&H, Amarva Sheehan, and that company manages the waste handling for the majority of the cities in our county. And they will be, I'm recommending that we contact her to find out exactly what the opportunities are. But that would be for all of us. And then she is also knowledgeable enough to tell us who else they manage and who manages those that their firm does not.
Yeah, I thought we received something from them at one of our meetings. So
you got an update on the bill, but not this aspect of it, because this is all new.
All right, so SVC would be contacting that person, or Amira, or Amira is going to be contacting the LA branch.
So I'm recommending staff will take a look at it, that they contact this company and that person, Marva, to learn more. But in the meantime, they're going to be contacting each city to ask the city manager to write a letter as outlined in the presentation. And my question is that some cities, such as ours, won't be able to initiate the letter until they check with Marva. So we're trying to keep the communication lines open and make sure we all get the same information.
And a bottom line question for SVCE, is this something that is going to cost us, or will we break even on this? Make money on it? Have you guys had a chance to do any number crunching on it?
So there's no intention to make money. At the end of the day, it'll certainly be costing us staff time, and we will recover the supply costs through the allocation back to the respective cities for their share of the incremental procurement. So that's how it would work.
It's going to cost the cities money, and this is a way to reduce the cost to cities. And Director Abikoga.
Thank you. I don't mean to disadvantage our cities, but I do think about cost recovery with everything we do at our city. We charge an administrative percentage, and I'm wondering if we should be negotiating something like that with the cities to keep ourselves solve it.
Maybe I could add to that. We'll do an admin, we'll bring it back to you. I actually think the bigger cost to us is opportunity cost. We have a very small staff, and Ian Williams is working on deals of tens of millions of dollars. And this is a very small deal. So when you think about the energy over here, it's really very small. So the benefit is all for the city. So to me, that's the bigger issue, that we want to make sure that this is run by Tony Yulo and his group. We don't want to be the ones selling this program to cities. It should be run by cities. We will do the transaction with as little overhead as possible. So it really needs to be something coming from the cities. The cities have to take responsibility for all this. So, and then we'll bring back to you what our admin cost overhead is, which the big picture is not going to be very much.
Sounds good.
So thank you for bringing this option, and thank to Tony, as always. We're looking for an opportunity because this has the potential to be very expensive for cities. And this will help our cities. So thank you. Any other comments from anyone? Okay. Thank you, Don. And we will go ahead to the next item. Girish?
My last one, just to touch base with you on a recent item, which was one CCA down south called Western Community Energy, filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy on Monday. So we don't have the details of, everything that led to it. The press release did talk about increased delinquency payments, increased supply costs from last year's heat wave. So it's just something that I think is, when you think about 24 CCAs in the state, we've all gone through a very difficult year with the pandemic. Everyone's had delinquencies. All of us have had the same heat wave, etc. So it's very unfortunate. So we'll monitor the situation from a Cal CCA Trade Association perspective. We're looking at SVCE itself is, quite financially healthy. We have a risk management program, and we are well hedged for this summer. So we will communicate that. Cal CCA will communicate that to the governor's office, key staffers in the legislature, and also communicate with the CPUC. So we'll see how this unfolds. I expect that we'll be asked to provide more information to regulators so that the regulators are assured that CCAs are a healthy organization, viable organization, and we would be doing our piece to maintain reliability and affordability to customers. The one hand, I'll keep you updated as we get to learn. And Chair Gibbons, that is the end of my report.
Thank you. I believe we have comments from Director Flygore and then also from the member of the public. So Director Flygore.
Thank you, Chair Gibbons. And Girish, you already touched on one of my questions, which is I figured regulators are going to start looking closer at CCAs. And so I'm happy to hear that we are going to be proactive. But was this a surprise? Were there any red flags, anything we can learn from? And then the other question I had, and you touched on it, I think, which is, do we have any contracts or relationships that will be impacted by this? Because I know we do a lot of joint agreements with other CCAs.
We do not have, SVCE does not have a contract with Western Community Energy for any power supply deals, so we're not impacted there. Western Community Energy has voluntarily withdrawn from the trade association, CalCCA. They withdrew 2 days ago. So we're going to have to work out as a trade association about their fees that they may, so we're going to work that out. So that's with CalCCA. And as far as lessons learned, there are a couple we need to get to know more. But just on the surface of it, I think their staffing, they were extremely dependent on consultants. They literally had, I think, less than 5 staff, maybe, or right around there. And they had consultants basically doing a lot of key work. And I think when you think about many of us in the Bay Area and CCAs, we have got our own experienced staff. And so even the staff they had, so that's another lesson learned. If anything, part of what I'm going to be talking about later today also is where we are heading in the next step of our maturity. And it is going to be, a lot more complex. And we need to make sure we have the capability to meet those challenges. And part of it is going to be staffing. So once we get to learn more on things like hedging, what their practices were, there may be some lessons learned, but on the surface of it, we're pretty much 100% hedged for this summer. I'm not sure that they were, but we'll get to know more details, I think, in the coming weeks and months.
Thanks, Girish. And a quick follow-up, but I don't want to exploit the fact that, things aren't going well for them, but any upside for us, the fact that they have filed, any way we can benefit, I don't know, from contract relationships, any upside for us because of this?
I think not SVC per se. I think if anything, the community as a whole will be looking at all our processes, whether it's risk management, et cetera. I think another thing may be talking to the legislature about was there anything in the regulations that set WCE up to fail? And if that's the case, those regulations will probably be applicable to other CCAs, new or existing. Again, on that, we need to get a little more detail. I know that the PUC has regulations in place for new CCAs that are quite stringent. That's one of the reasons that SVCE took a loan from all the member agencies when we started, because you actually have to prepay for electricity for a period of time. So we'll find out more. It's a great question, but at this point, not so much on the upside.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, and Director Alahi, and then we will go to the public, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess it's tough to see fellows in the same business go under. Is their bankruptcy going to affect their resources? I mean, they're buying supplies from somebody else and they have contracts with them and they can't. Are the chances of some of their resources going under, and would that have any impact on us or not? And I guess we are hedged, but by the same token, I'm sure you take a very careful look at the people who are supplying us power, because when one of their customers goes bankrupt, some of the people who are supplying powers would also be affected. So you may want to do a review on some of those people. I thought Director Figueroa had a good question about are there any upsides for us, which is basically in a bankruptcy setting, there may be contracts that they are going to have to try to get away from, and they may or may not be something that we need to buy or pick up on. If they had prices at a good price, but it sounds like they probably didn't. The prices are probably going to be going up overall, so we need to look at it. And I think overall we probably do need to look at tightening our belt also. I mean, to make sure over the next 5 years with our projections don't lead us in the same place. I know they probably won't, but it's a good time to review it. And as far as the PUC and all those are concerned, I think, Girish, you make a good point to try to push them not to over-regulate and cause financial loss. But probably the tendency is going to be to go the other way. I mean, usually regulators will go, oh, we want to make sure that never happens again, and we'll make more tougher regulations. So that's something it's good that you're looking at that. So please continue doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll close the discussion, questions from the board, and go to the public. And we have one speaker, Bruce Carney, I believe.
Unmute. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Bruce.
Super. So I want to just spend a minute talking about the bankruptcy, and then the other couple of minutes talking about bioenergy from food waste and other waste. When PG&E went bankrupt 20 years ago, a lot of the blame fell on Enron, but in fact, one of the critical reasons why PG&E went bankrupt is that legislatively, the fees they could charge their customers were capped, and the price they had to pay for their energy supply wasn't. And so, you know, when I look at what's going on with CCAs right now, I see a similar picture. So you can't disconnect your customers, you can't make them pay you. And the pain of this isn't apparently felt in Sacramento the same way it's felt in the boardrooms of all the CCAs and presumably the IOUs as well. So that, you know, this is sort of, you know, a danger signal, a red flag. And, you know, if I were, you know, trying to figure out where the next lemming is to go over the cliff, I would start by looking at which CCAs have raised their rates above PG&E or SCE's rates. And there's certainly several that have done so. San Jose Clean Energy most recently and most locally, because when CCAs charge more than the IOU, that certainly gives businesses in particular reason to switch. Now, Western Riverside County also is a very poor area, and so I imagine they had a much higher percentage of non-paying customers than we do, but still there are similarities. With respect to bioenergy, I'm surprised Margaret didn't mention that in Mountain View, we've been making electricity from landfill gas for 30 years. It underlies Shoreline Amphitheater and Shoreline Park. My understanding is that that's a summer peaking energy source because the hotter the land is, the more gas comes out of it. But at least in the case of a closed landfill, it doesn't produce anywhere near as much energy as it did when the lines were first put in to collect the gas. I'm very concerned about the potential, if I understood correctly, that trucks full of waste would leave the Bay Area and go all the way to Southern California. You know, I would love to see the Sunnyvale Smart Station or some new facility near the Metcalf Energy Center in South County be the location where Santa Clara County's bio waste gets turned into electricity for Santa Clara County. Methane from rotting materials is a horrible greenhouse gas, but the pollution from trucks going 300 or 400 miles to the south full of our compostables is also not a situation that I would like to see. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Very good questions and comments as usual. So I think what we're going to be hearing at the board, thinking about the board meeting, is staff's going to do a little more research on all of these topics, and the presentations being made to the board will take advantage of the questions that have been asked here, and the information will be presented to the board to expedite and clarify the topics. Is there anything else on these 4 items that the executive committee would like to offer? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Girish. And with that, we will now move to item number 3, which is the recommended resumption of Silicon Valley Clean Energy delinquency payments and our policy thereof. It's an action by this board to make a recommendation to the full board.
All right, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon again, directors. So we've now had several conversations on this, beginning with the executive committee a month ago. We spoke, of course, at the Finance and Admin Committee, and then at the full board meeting last month or earlier this month. And if we can go to the next slide, please. The general conclusion out of really all those discussions was that the favorite approach was a very gradual resumption of our delinquent payment policy after PG&E officially, restarts their disconnection policy. That's scheduled to happen at the end of June. So we'd be looking at a rolling restart beginning in July. So what we're doing in this short presentation here today really is just outlining the terms that we would put into a resolution for a vote by the full board in June. So next slide, please. So just as a refresher, our historic delinquency policy looked like this. If customers were more than 90 days late and had a balance of over $100, they received from us a late payment notice by mail, and that told them that they had 15 days to pay, or they would potentially be returned to PG&E. We actually did this 3 times, so they had 2 to 3 months to put the situation right, to either make sufficient payment or to enroll in a PG&E payment plan. If they didn't do that in the 3rd month after receiving their 3rd notice, they would be returned by us to PG&E. We generally saw 150 to 200 returns a month prior to COVID. If we look at customers right now that would meet this greater than $100 and greater than 90 days, we have about 9,000 customers in that bucket. So that's the group that would potentially begin to receive late payment notices in July. Next slide, please. There are a lot of resources available, and we've talked about these in our previous meetings. One of the things we very much intend to do here would be, in our late payment notices, expand those and include additional communications about these available resources. Another really important development is that at the CPUC just last week, a proposed decision was issued that would auto-enroll all IOU customers into 24-month payment plans if they had a balance past 60 days. And a 24-month payment plan just means that their current balance and arrears would be divided by 24, and that amount would be added to their bills for the next 24 months. And as long as they pay on a regular monthly basis going forward, they stay enrolled in that plan. If they don't, they fall out and they're subject to disconnection again. But it is a way of getting customers who are in arrears into a repayment scheme. So that would, in effect, assuming this gets finalized, and that's going to happen later in June, and we anticipate that it will, this will sort of further temper our kind of reinstatement of our plan, because we don't return customers who are in payment plans. So next slide, please. So here are the draft resolution terms. These will probably be worded more beautifully in an official document in June, but this is the essence. So we're looking to restart our SVCE delinquent payment policy July 1, which is after PG&E has lifted their disconnection moratorium. As always, any customer with a balance greater than 100 days or greater than $100 and further out than 90 days would receive a late payment notice, so that they would get their first notice in July. We would expand the late payment notice to include a lot of information on available programs, and we would provide that in multiple languages. We would send separate communications to Carafira customers who are eligible for the AMP program, which is a particularly attractive program in that it actually involves debt forgiveness. So customers that are on this plan, if they make their current month's payment 1/12 of their balance and arrears is forgiven, and both PG&E and SVC are compensated for that by the state. So we really want to encourage our customers who are eligible for that to participate, and we have a few thousand that are. And then if we do all these things, and again, I mentioned there's also the auto enrollment in payment plans that PG&E would be doing per the PUC. We wouldn't have any returns happening before October of this year, and I'd expect it would be a relatively low number even in October, again, with everyone having been auto enrolled in payment plans. So that's what we'd be looking at in terms of restarting this, and it would just roll forward then as it always has with these additions. So open it up for questions at this point.
Thank you, Don. And we have had a chance to discuss and think through this at several occasions, and I appreciate how much we've refined everything that we're talking about here. Are there any questions from the executive committee? Thinking again in terms of the presentation to the board. Director Flygore.
Thank you, and thanks for that, Don. And I completely understand why we're doing this. I just still don't like it for obvious reasons, because we're in the middle of it. Well, we're coming out of a pandemic, but we know so many people have been impacted. So I get we have to do this. I mean, we just talked about another CCA filing for bankruptcy. Just two follow-up questions. One is, what's the process if a customer wants to return to SVCE? And I know this policy existed before it was put on hold. So I am just not familiar with, we have the customer return to PG&E, but are there any barriers to returning to us? Do they have to prove anything?
The only barrier really is 12 months. So there's a rule that says, customers can't go back and forth between PG&E and a CCA any more often than once a year. And that's a more general rule than just applying to this. But if a customer is returned, they could re-enroll with us in a year. They wouldn't be banned for life or anything like that. Yeah.
And then thanks, Don. And the second question is the Cure/FERA customers. Apart from the additional communication, I remember in one of our many discussions on this, we had talked about somehow treating those customers differently under the policy. But based on this presentation, it appears that apart from trying different ways to reach them and including additional information in that communication, are we treating them any differently from other customers in any other way?
No. The Cure/FERA customers that are eligible for the arrearage management program, which is a subset of all Cure/FERA customers, we'll be getting direct outreach from us and already are from PG&E, and we'd work with PG&E on our own program to do that. We could expand direct communication to all Cure/FERA customers, but it would, if they're getting a late payment notice, they'll be getting that communication anyway. And again, many Cure/FERA customers are not in arrears. Probably 90% are doing okay. But we could communicate, if you thought that was a good thing for us to do, to that community maybe more directly than customers at large, or that customers that are otherwise receiving late payment notices.
Yeah, the arrearage program is very, very good. So I think we've said that we're going to make a point of making sure they have the information of that as one of their options. So in one sense, that's unique because of being Care and FERA customers.
Mm-hmm.
Good. And then just a quick follow-up. What is the process if a customer receives the LPN, one of the three, and calls SVCE? Is there a grace period? Like what does that interaction and communication look like if someone does call and says, I just can't, pay this?
So the LPN generally refers people to PG&E payment centers because that's where payments are actually made. So that's one distinction there. If they were to call us, and our information is on there as well, we would explain the letter, and we would work to describe the available resources, and answer any questions we can on that. But yeah, I don't know that if they call in, we'd be able to do anything other than explain or provide additional information.
Right, and the challenge for that, of course, is that they're going to be likely be in arrears on their entire bill, which is the gas bill, the PCIA, and our energy. So we have limitations on that as well. Director Elahi.
Yeah, I guess we've discussed it before. I really appreciate your providing all the details and getting into this. I'm just trying to figure out what are what is our own overhead as far as engaging in this effort to keep the customers. Is there a staff person that's going to be dedicated to doing all this stuff, or is this automatically generated? And are we mailing out these notices, or they're going by email? Because it seems to me these guys are going to be closed down by PG&E anyway, because by the time they get 90 days notices from us, PG&E's already shut them off. And the threat to them is we'll send you back to PG&E, and they'll say, oh, so what? What's the big deal about that? It's going to cost me a penny more on utilities, which I'm not paying anyway. So, is it worth us spending any time on it at all? Let's just forget about any collections. The great thing I see about all this is providing them with notices about Carefera and other options that the customer has. So hopefully they have a chance to redeem themselves. But looking at it as some effort that's going to end up collecting anything, I don't know what your historical data shows, whether people that you send these notices actually start paying you guys, even if they're not paying PG&E, or whether they're just, they just end up getting shut down anyway. Do you have any specific information? The scale probably hasn't been as large as it is right now, but I mean, does it really make any difference? I mean, if they're not paying PG&E, they don't really care about our 20 cents or our $20 out of $200. And if they're going to be sent back to PG&E, they're not paying PG&E anyway. So my real concern is how much overhead are we going to be putting in from our staff resources and costs, and whether that justifies it. And the second follow-up to that is when PG&E starts collecting, are they collecting for the whole thing? Just like the auto bill, is that going to be the entire bill, or is just the PG&E portion?
Well, I'll answer that question first, and then your first question second. But yeah, unfortunately, there's the waterfall payment scheme that we've described before, where the PG&E portion of the bill gets paid first. That resumes again in July. Unless the CPUC takes action to extend the change in that waterfall payment scheme that's been in place here over the last several months. So yeah, it is possible that a customer can be okay with PG&E debt-wise, but owe us money, and that's why we have to have this send back policy. Historically, our rate of returns has been pretty low, and our rate of write-offs has been pretty low. We don't act as a collection agency. Some CCAs do. They actually try to go out and they work with a third party to collect on that debt that return customers may owe the CCA. Our research into that has indicated that it, maybe to your point, it really isn't worth it. Not enough is collected to even pay for the effort and for the reputational issues that can present themselves when you're a collection agency. So yeah, I think what we're doing here and what we've done historically with the policy has been a pretty decent balance. We have a mail house that does the mailings. The generation of the lists is done by our third party Calpine, that our data services provider. We, of course, review it and that sort of thing. But what we'd be looking to set up here would be an expanded letter. We'd be doing mailings like we always have to more people than we than we have in the past, at least for a while. But the process shouldn't be too onerous, I don't think, relative to what we've done before.
Yeah, and I guess that's what you have to look at, because trying to collect from individuals who are not paying PG&E is not helpful. And if they call a PG&E may be telling them, hey, just pay our portion, forget these guys, don't worry about them. And if they send it back to us, then we'll deal with it. Is that actually costing us? I mean, does SVC do the mailing? Doesn't PG&E do all the mailings of bills and everything else? What do you guys mail out normally to customers?
PG&E does all the mailings of bills, and they will mail, a disconnection notice and that sort of thing. We do the mailings of the late payment notices that come from SVCE. And again, our late payment notices don't threaten disconnection; they threaten return to PG&E, and those letters come from us.
What do you think the cost is going to be to do that, since you have more customers now? I mean, are we talking about in the few thousands and the hundreds of thousands, or I mean, maybe?
Yeah, it's a few thousand. I mean, it's probably 45 cents a letter, something like that. Yeah, so it's even with 9,000, that's and that number will of course be reducing over time pretty quickly, I think. It's a modest amount.
I think we can justify that just based on the good information we're providing the customers, and hopefully they can take advantage of it. But it may be something to keep an eye on, so that it's just not cost effective. And again, I think this is this might be a good point for our legislative individuals to bring up to the CPUC, that the waterfall should continue. Otherwise, independent service agencies like us are going to have problems with these collections, rather than just let all the money go to PG&E. So you guys may want to put it on your agenda.
Yeah, I know that Melissa and Ben are working on exactly this. It's something that we've talked about and that they're in communication with other CCAs on, and it's definitely a high priority for the LNR group.
Right, and the Western bankruptcy might help us in this case. Great, thank you, sir.
So again, thank you. There's been a lot of good comments that I would encourage you to incorporate into your presentation that will answer questions in advance. I would offer the one that threw me a little bit, but got answered at our last discussion, which is that we're starting everyone at the new 90 days. It's not that anyone who's over 90 days and over 100 automatically goes back to PG&E. Everyone is starting with the new 90 days. And I think that's an important clarification to us. One, it supports our reputation as being supportive of the community, making information available to all their options, and not immediately, harming and any of our customers. I think it's a very positive message, and hopefully will help us recover more quickly. So other than that, I would go to the public to see if there are any comments from the public. I do not see any. And I'll bring it back to discussion. And Girish, you have a comment.
Yeah, I was planning on putting this on the consent calendar because this has gone through multiple iterations. And I think, so we were addressing the questions that we got from the board as a whole. So I think we'll add the comments that we got from you into our board report, and I'm planning for the consent.
I would think that makes sense, unless anyone feels it shouldn't be a consent item. It's a very, I think, a positive topic. Okay, so I think we're all agreeing that a consent item with a few clarifications from today would be great. Okay. And yes, Director Elahi.
Yeah, I just had one more comment on the notices that you send out. Maybe you should put a couple of lines in there, thanking them for believing in clean energy and for being a customer of clean energy, and that we want to encourage you to continue doing that. And this is what we're providing. So maybe a couple of lines might be helpful to the customers.
Nice thought.
Thank you.
Okay.
Noted.
And with that, I believe we're going to be asked to recommend this to the board, the full board. So we would need a roll call vote to recommend that this go to the full board.
So
So we
moved.
have, yes,
Second,
Director Flygore on motion by Director Flygore and seconded by Director Alahi. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Gibbons,
Aye.
Director Flagger,
Yes.
Elahi,
yes.
Abe Koga.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries with Vice Chair Tyson absent.
Thank you. And we will go to the final item on the calendar, which is item 4, Introduction to Strategic Plan Updates. This is a discussion item. And Girish?
Thank you. And I'll just recognize that it's amazing how Andrea can type up your votes and who made the motion and second, just like that. It's like she has 4 hands doing it right away. So this is our strategic plan FY22 update. We bring it obviously to the executive committee first to get some input from you before we take it to the board. So if you can go to the next slide. So this is a timeline of how we look at our strategic plan, which also includes, in a way, we want to align the CEO evaluation and goals, our staff work plan, the budget also. So you've already started my evaluation and it'll go into setting my goals for next year. And we're going to stick where the red arrow is May through August on getting input from you and the board over the next several months. Our aim is to have an approved budget and a strategic plan and focus areas in September. And then we go ahead with implementation. Obviously, in the middle of the year, as things change, we bring it back to you if we need changes. Next slide. So you've seen this, our mission and our measure. We have not changed this since our inception. Next slide. So I want to spend a few slides looking back. I won't take too much time on it. There may be a slide or two that has a lot of text on it, but I'm really not going to spend too much time on it. So to remind you, we've kind of reduced the length of our strategic plan by about half, but we still have about 19 goals and 61 measures. Of those 19 goals, we identified 5 focus areas, and focus areas doesn't mean that we are not doing other stuff too, but it's just what are we doing in the upcoming year that may be different that really we need to focus on to make sure that we get to that next level of maturity in those areas. So let's take a look at last year's focus areas in the next slide. So last year, these were the things that we listed as focus areas. Additional resources and efficiencies, which is we needed more staff, and I'll talk to you about that, which anyway, we have these 5 areas, and I'm going to actually move on to the next slide, where I'll report a little bit on the progress we've made on each of these and where we are. So we have conducted several recruitments, including CFO, and you can see this here, but we also lost several people. So during the year, we've gone through a manager of regulatory affairs. We hired a data engineer who then left in about 3 to 4 months. We've recruited for a CFO. We have a new director of policy. And we've also have a principal power analyst. At the same time, we continue to be really stressed for resources. And that's something that I've communicated to you, and that's going to be part of my 2022 focus areas. Now, we continue to be in recruiting for several positions, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge to recruit in these times, and we're still figuring out why. So we've had some luck, but we've also had in some areas, we've had a lot of challenges. The enterprise-wide systems, metrics, and tools, which is essentially a 2-year journey for us. We have Amrit, who is leading up that process, and we are calling it business process optimization. We'll continue with that. I hope to continue with that next year as a strategic focus area. Just last week, we've hired a contractor to help us develop detailed business requirements. And this is going to be enterprise-wide. And we need this as we get to that next level of sophistication for our systems. Let's go to the next slide, please. Our focus on equity. So this was the first time that we added this as a focus. So it's part of the strategic plan. And we've made a very strong start here. Not only did we, from a compliance standpoint, turn in our first supplier diversity report, but also we looking at an equity framework. And in the next board meeting, we'll talk to you more about that as to how we plan to look at equity across the agency. We also did a very cool survey of 600 employees. We call it the SEVI survey, which is Socioeconomic Vulnerability Index. And so by census tract, we were able to see what customers thought about different environmental issues, how they responded to different kind of programs. And this is really going to help us when we design our programs to focus on balancing out equity issues also. On digital pivot, the eHub has been, and some other tools like Granicus, which allows us to reach out to customers. We have a complete revamp of our website led by Dawn, Pamela, and their teams. Here are just a few metrics of things that we've done that are quite different than in the past. So the number of emails that have been delivered, the average open rate typically in industry is closer to 20%. And we've had a lot of unique engagements in eHub also. And our website visits have increased. Next slide. So in community outreach and leverage, we've had, especially in the last month, you've received a lot more emails from us in being engaged in the legislature. And that started with us hiring a senior government affairs manager, and you approved that position mid-year. We've also reached out quite regularly to a large group of community advocates to help us with things like the Building Decarbonization Joint Action Plan. We had more than 50 people work with us, a number of different groups, had more than 150 comments that we incorporated in there. So we'll go to the next slide, and I also will tell you when we come into the June meeting, we'll have accomplishments that are agency-wide. We're going to work with all staff to present that to you at our June meeting. So I wanted to now shift to looking forward. What has changed? What are the big picture changes since last year? You've seen some of this in the last couple of months. I've been talking about this. We've been talking about this with our staff also. But if you think about the national side, not only do we have a new administration, but our society is getting back to normal. From the energy side, not only is equity an issue across society, but even within the energy side, that's had a big focus. For the first time, a president's talked about a national clean grid in 2035. So being almost more aggressive than and ambitious than what California has. And there's a $6 trillion budget with money flowing into also clean energy investments. Electric vehicles are mainstreaming globally. Just a couple of weeks ago, you saw an announcement about the Ford F-150 truck. And across the globe, people are doubling down on investing in EV infrastructure. So that's coming down to California, but what's going on in California, not only do we have a state budget surplus, where when we started the pandemic, I think they were forecasting $30 to $40 billion deficits, and now we're on the other side. So we have, whether it's utility debt relief or even clean energy investments, there's money coming in from the state. Also, Governor Newsom talked about an internal combustion ban by 2035. And coming down to the regulatory agencies that manage the energy grid, all these things you've seen before, but just last Friday, we had an order come out from the PUC. Previously, we talked about 7,500 new megawatts that was going to be needed in the next 5 years. Well, that number is 11,500 megawatts now through 2026. We also had a PCIA decision that was quite negative. We also have the report on direct access expansion that actually is, I'd say, positive for us in the sense from a revenue standpoint or a risk standpoint. Direct access has been constrained. Building decarbonization and EVs are on the rise in California also. Within CCAs, we obviously are engaged in all these issues that you just saw above, but we also created CC Power, which has a lot of potential for the future to provide economies of scale and have a lot of us work together. But we'll see how the WCE bankruptcy also plays out. So these are some big external shifts, and I'd like to go to the next slide where I'll talk about some strategic focus areas that I'm proposing for FY22. Now, I'm hoping that none of these things are going to be a surprise to you because we've talked about it at least once or twice, but I do want your feedback on this whole presentation, obviously. So for the next year, I'm thinking the first thing is we're moving into an operations mode. We've signed over the last 3 to 4 years, the board has signed 13 agreements for clean energy of 1.6 billion. The first one of those is going to come online December 2021. That's going to completely change the way we do our operations. Because previously the PPAs, we were basically buying the renewable energy credits. Now those renewable energy credits and energy are in one product, and we're the ones who are going to have to schedule them. So last month, you actually approved us entering into an agreement with Z Global for scheduling coordination services. But Monica and her group are going to have to work with the SC and with 3CE on operating agreements and how we're actually going to operate this. So it's very exciting. This is another stage of growing up, so to speak. Most utilities actually own and operate their resources, and that we're going to be in the operations mode. So I think this is going to take us at least a year or two to really work out all the bugs in that. Clean energy mix and integration. As we go forward, we need to look at with these state mandates coming in. When we started our agency, we kind of picked a number of 50-50 renewables and carbon free. And that was back in 2016, early 2017. But we already have regulations that say we have to be at 60% renewables in 2030. So we know we're going to have to move past that 50-50 mark. And so that's another thing we need to look at. The third bullet here is grid integration. One of the things that's missing in SVCE, and we didn't need it in the past, is interaction with the CAISO. The CAISO operates the grid, but as long as we were buying renewable energy credits, we didn't really need to interface with them as much. Now with us going into an operations mode, there's going to be a lot of interface with them. Additionally, with these emerging technologies that are very large utility scale, and with programs on the demand side, which are going to get integrated with the CAISO, we need to have more of a presence at the CAISO and develop that expertise inside the organization. It's going to impact Amy's shop and the power supply side and customer side. Financial stability. Given where just on Monday, when you think about WCE also, this is something that we really need to keep our eye on. The power prepay is a program that can reduce our costs. So that's something that we will be working on. It takes a tremendous amount of work that we've been doing so far, and we hope to bring that to you, a recommendation for a deal very shortly. We continue to look at our energy risk management policies and tighten that up in terms of if there's necessary to do more on the hedging side. The trade-offs between RPS and clean energy. As we look at our net revenues over the next several years, we need to see, like this year, for the first time, we were in the red. We expect to be in the red next year also before going into the black. And this becomes a trade-off, I think, for the board to look at. And this is analysis that we'll be providing you as to where we can save money, and that may require some changes, if that's the direction to go, changes in some of our clean energy goals. Staffing and internal operations. And this is something that, I told you just a little while ago that though we have 32 positions, we are short about 7 in terms of staffing. So we are working hard at filling those positions, but I will be asking for a few more positions in the next year's budget. Also, post-COVID hybrid work. How do we be more productive? How can we maintain the strong relationships we have within SVCE staff, between the board and staff? So that's going to be something that we'll be rolling out over the next year. I've already talked to you about business process optimization as a focus of last year. That'll be another part of internal operations. And then enterprise cyber risk. When you think about what's happened to various organizations, whether it's phishing or ransomware, we are already investing in developing a strategic defense posture for SVCE, and we will continue to invest in that in the coming year. So if we can go to the next slide. So now kind of heading a little higher up, when you think about us being created, you had like 3 different vectors. One was clean electricity, but also providing innovative programs on transportation and buildings to our customers. I think those are still what we ought to continue doing. So I've just said, let's continue to maintain our flight path over there. Next slide, which is my last slide. In talking to staff and getting feedback, and this is an iterative process of getting feedback from staff and then bringing it to you, etc. One comment that came up is, should we be tweaking our mission or putting more emphasis on resiliency? We are spending $5 million on resiliency in the next couple of years. And resiliency is something that all our communities are interested in, just where we are in Northern California. That's something that's going to be of more interest. Given that we are in another drought, which has the potential to increase, have more fires too, and these PSPS events, I think resiliency is not something that's going to go away. So I just wanted to get some feedback from you, big picture again, whether we should add it to our mission. We could by saying, it's free, by carbon-free, affordable, resilient and reliable electricity. So something like that, we can play around with it, but just in general, if you think this is something that deserves a higher level of, basically that we can see it at a higher level in our mission. So that's the end of my presentation, and my ask of you is obviously ask us questions, but feedback also on, do you think those strategic focus areas are okay? Are there any big external shifts that you see we should be incorporating into our thinking? And then lastly, is there your comments on our mission? Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Girish. Always important to refocus on the strategic plan and how everything melds together. My question is, are you going to tee this up at the June meeting? We don't have a July meeting. And are you going to ask for decisions and then another discussion in August and then a decision in September? Is that your game plan?
Okay, sorry, I should have gone to another slide. We do have, I missed a slide, which actually addresses your question.
Okay. I'm glad to know that.
Yes, we did not script this. So I do plan on bringing it to the board because, so on the left-hand side, an input and decision over this period of time. So on June 9th, it's just to get input. And the way we worked it in the past is if you give us input as a whole, we can kind of fold it into our strategic plan. At the same time, we are working at staff as a detailed work plan, which gets into a lot more detail than you see. So I'm looking for input, for example, things like other strategic focus areas. Do you agree with that? That helps us with our budgeting too. But in terms of an actual decision on the strategic plan, it would be at the September 8th meeting that we'll actually ask you to adopt the updated strategic plan. So June 9th and August 11th are more of provide us input, and you'll actually make a decision on the updated strategic plan only on September 8th.
Okay, thank you for that. Helpful. Okay, so going back to your initial questions about focus. I think you had 4 points you wanted feedback on.
Yeah, so one is any other like uncertainties as a whole, big picture, macro, external shifts that you think that we just want to talk about outside of what I'd already mentioned. So that's one. The strategic focus areas, comments on that. And number 3 would be, do we want to tweak the mission by adding the resiliency into it?
So I'll see if I can stimulate a little conversation and say that the word resilience has bounced around a lot. So I think we really need to be thoughtful about what we mean by resilience. And I would perhaps tie it back to one of the questions I have, which is the discussion on renewable versus carbon-free.
So what is your question on that?
Well, again, it's the use of words. When we first started, there was a significant debate between going carbon-free and 100% carbon-free versus 100% renewable. And then state legislature uses the term renewable. We use the term carbon-free. And then there's policies probably coming to us about, do we really need under these economic circumstances and so forth to be 100% carbon-free? What are the trade-offs? So I'm thinking that all of that needs to be clarified in our strategic plan to help the board make decisions going forward on what kind of power we purchase and how that feeds into resilience.
Okay, a very good question. And so we've been trying to shift to talking about clean energy. That's in our name too. It's Silicon Valley Clean Energy. And so we have clean energy, which is comprised of renewable, RPS, California renewables, and carbon-free. So I think in general, that's the direction we want to head. As far as what's RPS, what's carbon-free, and how much of it we should have, that is one of the strategic focus areas when it comes to financial stability. So that would be something that we, yes.
Yeah.
So that would be something that will continuously, that we will be bringing to your attention.
So I would offer that a little more context of how that fits into the financial stability would be useful so that in the strategic plan. Again, I'm looking at the strategic plan as the tool we use to go forward and make decisions and react if necessary to what's coming at us. So that's something I've been growing and changing my thoughts on, and I wouldn't be surprised if others have had some of that educational need. Okay, so that's just one little kicking off discussion. Others? Director Elahi?
Thank you. No, it's going to take a little digestion on my part. I mean, it's a pretty comprehensive plan, and I appreciate Girish presenting it to us a few times before it all sinks in. I appreciated you moving up the cyber enterprise cyber risks in the plan. I'm not sure what role it was going to play before, but that probably should be up there, especially if you're going to be producing energy also, because apparently these hacks and attempts are now all the energy web has been a target, for a very long time, and now they've come to fruition. And we only hear about the one that goes public. I'm sure there's others that have happened out there. So that should be way up there as far as the priorities are concerned. And now, as far as resiliency is concerned, I don't yet understand whether that's going to add something to our overall team. It's pretty mission is a fairly broad statement as it is, and you mentioned it was going to cost us $5 million more. If you can explain where that money is going to be expanded, and the other question obviously is with resiliency. And I guess the question is if we can't provide the power, PG&E is still providing the customer power, assuming PG&E is still in operation. Or does the PG&E say, sorry, you're not getting energy because Silicon Valley Energy didn't dump anything that they were supposed to dump in the pool? So the customer is still kind of getting resiliency if PG&E continues to provide power. So it doesn't matter if we say we're going to give resiliency, because I guess we'll get around to putting our share in as we are able to. So if you can explain that a little bit.
Yeah, let me tell you the definition of resiliency. I'd heard one definition which I really like. It is the two things we do for emergencies. One is we try to prevent something bad from happening to us. That's one, maybe that's more. But resiliency is the ability to come back after something happens. So let's say you have an earthquake, right? If you have a resilient system, it's how quickly can you come back from the damage that's caused. So in this case, say for power supply, in case there's an outage at the grid, how quickly can you get back? So resiliency is something like the Lights on Silicon Valley program that we just launched a month ago, where we're giving a $1,250 rebate for customers to install storage in their homes. We're basically paying for them to oversize storage. So if PG&E cuts off power in an emergency, they can basically get their lives back really fast by having the battery provide power for several hours. So that's a resiliency kind of deal where they're able to bounce back. So your ability to bounce back is essentially resiliency. And in the electric system, we weren't talking about that outside of earthquakes really for many years, but it's only with these PSPS events that agencies like us can contribute. And I'll end with talking about the $5 million. This is what the board approved at the beginning of the COVID period, the CRCR program of $5 million to agencies. And I have to say the city of Montecito was the first one to sign up. Of all 13, you got your paperwork in the first. Your city has applied for the planning grants and the capital expenditure grants. And we just extended the deadline for spending that by 1 more year. And we just did that about 2 months ago.
I guess I understand what you're saying is the resiliency is at the homeowner level, because I mean, at the earthquake level, if there's an earthquake and our resource generator can't deliver or the grid doesn't work, and PG&E can still deliver, the customer really is not going to feel a pinch at that point.
Right.
But if PG&E shuts down, obviously we can't do anything. Then at the home level, it wouldn't make a difference. So that program needs to be worked on to make sure the homeowners can get that storage unit in place, and have that and have enough resources allocated. So that's moving forward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, Margaret. Yes, Director Abikoga.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I also appreciate the emphasis on our security concerns in light of, well, I'm on 2 agencies now that have been affected. So I think that's a growing, and it's been, as we've seen, these public agencies and I guess you could call utilities seem to be targeted more these days. So I think that's definitely a high priority for us. And I do think resiliency, I guess I too would like to learn a better definition for it, but that's clearly of importance as well. I guess my question was in the areas of focus. We had electricity, transportation, and building. I think it was. I know we've done a lot in building, and of course electricity. I'm wondering. I've been, just trying to think about what more we could do in the transportation area with my other work at MTC and even the Air District. There's some kind of, I think there's some kind of coalescing that can happen. And at the Air District, we're seeing the funding, the state funding that's supposed to be coming down in the form of grants. And, even when I think about my city and what I'm seeing at those levels in terms of opportunities, I don't think our city is positioned to uptake those or apply for grants, for instance. And I don't know if it's an awareness piece or it's a lack of staffing, technical expertise, but I'm just wondering if there's something there that we, our organization, could play a bigger role in. I know that I think for us, EVs are definitely a focus, but I've just been wondering what more can we do? At our city, we're talking about looking internally at our own fleets to make sure that we go electric, and there is funding out there to do that. I've noticed at the Air District, a lot of Alameda County seems to be really on it, and they tend to apply for a lot of these grants to electrify their, police cars even and whatnot. And I don't see that as much coming from Santa Clara County. So I was just wondering if that's there's a role there that could be played with clean energy.
Thank you for that. What I understand from your question is, especially in the transportation and say the Air District, there are two things, right? How can we maybe collaborate more at the regional level with BATNA? And so, yes, and that's, in fact, Benna now just newly joined. That would be, the SVCE would have a resource to reach out. So that was part of the point in bringing a senior government relations manager, is to get that connection from the state down to local level. So that's one that you'll be seeing more effort on that. That's number one. The second, in terms of awareness for grants, etc., let me get back to you on that in a little more detail, and we'll tee this up. We do have something called SV Tech, which is Silicon Valley Technology Exchange Group. We've created that group, and essentially it's for this to bring knowledge and information sharing to people like fleet managers, either in the private sector or the public sector. And we also have funding available for them to tap into writing grants. So this may be a little bit more of connecting the dots closer. And so I think we'll work with Don Bray's group and with Mel's group to see how we can make more happen on both these sides.
So I'm going to toss perhaps an interesting monkey wrench. And I think I sent you the article, but I may not have. There was a very good discussion in the last week, the last few days, on the fact that VTA, because of state regulations, is going to be going to all electric vehicles, or going to electric vehicles. They're already at hydrogen, and they're not sure if they're going to go hydrogen electric hybrids or go all electric. One of the main constraints is that they don't have the charging stations in the strategic locations, the physical strategic locations, to meet that demand and all that that entails. There's the recharging time, duplicating of buses, what the delay, layover time is and all of that. That's going to be quite a humongous task coming up. Margaret, you know more about this than I am sure, but I think the target is 2030. Yeah, I think so. So I would say that that's going to be a new area of transportation focus, is public transit, and how power is going to be utilized in a whole new way, in addition to private vehicles. That's the public vehicles. So I think that's going to be a bit of a humdinger. So that's my main comment right now for the strategic, and I have some follow-ups after that. Yes, Director Flygore.
Thanks, Chair Gibbons. And I just wanted to add some brief comments because I thought the proposed focus areas are very comprehensive. I do think I'm sitting here listening to everybody, and I think everything I thought of is covered in some way in your list, because I think, we're all coming out of COVID. So of course I'm thinking about that transition, and it's covered there under staffing and operations. I'm thinking about our financial position and ensuring that that remains strong. I'm thinking about our resources and ensuring that, we have the right contracts in place and enough diversity to cover us if there's an emergency or an event, an unexpected event. So I feel like everything I'm sitting here thinking about that we need to really make sure we focus on over the next year is covered in your list. So great job, Girish. I don't know if, the counter to that is, can we really do all these things in 1 year? Should we make the list shorter and be more focused? But I thought you covered everything. I really, I'm sitting here and I appreciate what Director Abikoga said about the transportation side and where we can marry what we're doing with what our air and transportation boards are also doing. But I thought it was good. And there was one slide, when everybody's doing text messages, if you like something, you do the thumbs up. And there was one slide, I was like, oh, I'd like to do a thumbs up for that. And by the time I figured I could do it for reactions, you had switched slides. So I thought it was good. So thank you.
Please text me which slide that was afterwards. That would be great. Chair Gibbons, if I may make a short comment over here, there's just been excellent feedback. And obviously, we'd love to have more feedback as we go, but I think this has been very useful for us. And a couple of things that I can see as follow-up would almost be activities that we are going to work on. So, for example, the relationship with the regional agencies on transportation and what you brought up. I believe VTA was just looking at it. The customer advisory group was looking at public transit and charging at the depots versus charging remotely. So we took a look at this about a week or 10 days ago. I do think there's a lot of opportunity there. So that to me is part of what I call our in-flight projects. So that's our transportation initiatives. That'll be part of the in-flight projects. So we'll highlight that for you as part of our work plan and what we plan to do in the coming year. And I think I've got some very good feedback. I think the resiliency question is kind of a little bit of a 50-50. We need to provide a little more detail on what this actually means. And we will do that at our next go around. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, if there's no comment from the public, I see none. We will close the discussion on this item and then do a quick roundtable from the executive committee members on anything in particular. I would offer that I think it would be helpful to just review, even in a memo form to the board, what security and mental health processes that we have for the office? Have we done the active shooter drills? Particularly since we're in a public building, it's not just our office. And how do we handle the mental health? I know you've been working on all of this, but just to say that I think the board as a whole would like just a check-in that we're helping our staff and their families with any mental health challenges, and that all our procedures for active shooters and other incidents are taken care of. It's just a toughie. And I think we want to feel that the board wants to feel that we're doing everything we should and can do for that. And then the other comment, I wanted to make sure that if my understanding is correct, that Silicon Valley Clean Energy has received the vaccination form from the county to have staff sign, and that that's being followed up on and will be complied with. I think that would be another good thing to know. OSHA is coming out with some procedures expected the middle of next week. They come up with a draft last week or the week before, and they're coming out with some new procedures about how to work with staff that have chosen either not to vaccinate or chosen not to identify whether they have or not, and what that means for the organization and how people work together and how those policies of coming back to work fit in. So I just suggest that we keep an eye out for that. That is my understanding for the reason for the vaccination forms, is to help facilitate the work plans of coming back to the office.
Yes, and just a very quick answer on that. We have started that process a few days ago, and we're in the middle of that. And I will get back to you on, I think, the security, the active shooter training, and also I think the mental health of employees very broadly. You've been very supportive of this prior to COVID and through COVID. And I really think this last year has been, it's been a lot on employees, not just because of COVID, but because of our short staffing. It has just, it's been a big deal. And I think that ends up being a mental, emotional issue too. So we will get back to you on that and what additional things that we're going to do.
Yeah, and I think I can speak on behalf of this group, if not for the whole board, Margaret, perhaps, that the board is aware of how hard people are working, and that staff should know that we're there to support what they need to do their jobs and have a life, unlike the rest of us. So if that helps to some minor way of taking the stress off of the staff, it's not that we aren't aware and not appreciative, but we are trying to be supportive and proactive along with what you come up with for us to pay attention to.
Thank you very much. It's very meaningful because sometimes the situation is what it is currently. So having your support is your acknowledgement and your support both very useful. I'll make sure to communicate that to all staff.
And Margaret, if that makes sense for you, of course.
Absolutely, yes. Anything we can do to support our staff, please let us know if there's actually start thinking of something, and I'll talk with you offline, Girish, about it. But yes, please let us know what we can do. Thank you.
All right. I thank you all for your time on a Friday holiday weekend. Have fun, be safe. Director Elahi, your hand is up.
Yeah, I really appreciate all your comments, especially on the mental health items. I think we tend to forget that, but there's just enough stress and we need to all accommodate it. So those are really fine comments. I had a request to make. 2:30 just is about 10 minutes sooner than I can make it sometimes because we have prayers on Friday afternoons. Is it possible to move the executive committee to 2:40 or 2:45 p.m. start? Can we do that?
Fine with me. That looks okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we try it?
Right. So 2:45, does that work for you, Girish?
Yes,
All right.
it
Cool.
does.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you for mentioning. Happy to do that. All right. I wish you all safe, happy and fun weekend.
Yeah, have a great Memorial Day weekend. Take care. Bye.
Memorial Day. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.